Hello, Mindset Recovery friends. This is Roberto. It has been, I just watched my last video and didn't really realize that it's been about 2 months since I made that video, but it makes sense because I had been clean about 6 days when I made that video, and I made it just shy of 30 days, and I made the decision to go back out for a day, and then I got back in the program, which has been my pattern for about the last 2 years. But something has changed because I just picked up my 30-day key tag from Narcotics Anonymous today. Yay me, and yay my higher power. And that's not to say that this is going to be permanent and that I will never drink or use again. But something has changed because I haven't made it a full 30 days in a long time. So anyway, I wanted to share some of the insights that I have had in the last 2 months that I believe has helped me turn this corner in recovery. So one thing, I've talked about in here that I don't want to get too religious, but Narcotics Anonymous and AA are both spiritual programs which teach you spiritual principles to live your life by, which they're not, the 12 steps from my understanding are not designed to help you get clean or sober, because you're supposed to you're supposed to stop doing whatever it is that you're doing before you start the steps. And then the steps are a way to increase your spiritual awareness and connection to your higher power. And then that gives you the strength to continue staying clean and or sober, and give you a relationship that restores your relationship with your higher power. And also for me, have really helped build my character because, over 30 years of being kind of a shady person, dealing drugs and doing drugs and just, doing what I had to do to get those, it just takes its toll on your morality after a while. At least that's what happened to me. So even though I've been a Christian for a long time, I would say probably since I was about 11 years old, I started using alcohol at about 14. And by the time I was 18, I was full-blown alcoholic and drug addict. I wasn't like living under a bridge or anything, shooting up heroin. That was not my drug of choice. But my biggest problem was I moderated well enough that I still had a job. I still paid my bills. I was still a half decent parent. I didn't have a lot of the negative impacts that a lot of people have from drugs and alcohol. So two things happened. First of all, I just thought that I was not as bad as people. So, even though I knew that I was powerless over drugs and alcohol, I thought I had it. I still thought I had it under control because it could have been so much worse. But then the other thing is that that was a good excuse for me to tell myself that I could continue drinking alcohol and using because it wasn't that bad, which is just my disease bullshitting me to keep me from getting serious about recovery and keep me, in a prison to my own selfishness and self-will. So anyway, so for me, I said what I've heard other people say in the program, and a sponsor that I currently am working with is that, the 12 steps are not designed to get you clean. Well, I understand that. For me, I have been in and out of the rooms of AA and NA literally 3 decades and never was able to achieve any significant clean time or sobriety because I would always go back to it when it got hard. But the one thing that I did was that I continued to go back periodically. And so I had hope that that was the thing that was going to help me eventually get free of this disease. At least because, you never stop being an addict or an alcoholic, but if you work the program, you get a daily reprieve from using, and it gives you, freedom from it eventually. But at any rate, for me, the big thing that I noticed was that I knew from having been, I'm plugging in my computer because it looks like it's going to not make it if I don't do that. There it goes. So anyway, what happened was when I finally, because I partied hardy from the time that I was in my teens until my 50s. And then my body finally, threw in the towel and was like, yeah, okay, can't handle this anymore, dude. You're not 20 years old anymore. Then I had a stroke. And so I knew that the jig was up, that if I continued on the way that I was going, that I was going to die. And I didn't want to do that. So I also knew that the only way, because I had prayed and been in church and gone to counseling, and none of that stuff was sufficient to arrest my disease. But I knew what the answer was. And I also knew the reason that it hadn't been working is because they tell you in the program, if you're willing to do anything to get clean, then it's time to take certain steps. Well, I thought I was willing. I said I was willing. I tried to be willing, but going back out and doing the same thing over and over again, as I'm sure probably all of you have heard, and expecting different results is insanity. And for me, drugs and alcohol and addiction had made me insane. And I thought that I could handle it. And clearly that has not been the case. So anyway, I've said before that I'm a Christian. I'm not going to religiousize. I don't know. That's not a word, but but I'm a Christian. Okay. So my higher power is God. So I watch, preachers, and one preacher said, when we have a struggle, we have to be able to recognize, is it a temptation or is it a trial? Because the Bible teaches us that there's two opposite ways to handle either one of those based on what it is. Now, first of all, the serenity prayer says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So basically what that's saying, when I got in the program, my brain was so squirrely that I can't tell the difference between those two things. Is it something I should accept, or is it something that I have the power to change? And I've heard, a guy who is an old timer, he's died now, but he was like a Jedi of spirituality in the 12-step program. And he said that his problem was that he had been accepting things that he could change and trying to change things that he could not change. And so, now that I'm not out of the woods, obviously. I've been doing this a long time, and I just picked up a 30-day chip today. So I'm a fallible human being that has a long way to go, but I have learned a few things being in the program for a long time. And so now, by the grace of God and the little bit of sobriety that I've got, I can kind of tell the difference of some of the things that I can change and some of the things that I cannot change and I have to accept. So this preacher said, we have to be able to identify whether it's a a temptation or a trial. And so now I can, kind of do that. And he said, the Bible says if it's a temptation, that we're supposed to resist it. And if it's a trial, we're supposed to accept it. So for me, that's helped me a lot because, I know if I'm sitting here and my brain is saying, hey, what would be a great idea? Let's go get loaded. Let's go buy some drugs, whatever it is. That would be a temptation. And I am supposed to resist that. And so, knowing that, then I utilize the tools in the program that I've learned to use. And I fight that. And I say, no, no matter what, even though it sounds like a really good idea and it will feel good initially, and I will stop feeling this pain. For me, it's actually I just stop thinking about it for a little while until the drugs wear off. And then normally I feel even worse than I did before. And then on top of that, I am mad at myself and I regret my decision. And then I'm like depressed for 3 days thinking what a piece of junk I am because I gave in. That's my personal experience. So knowing that and still doing it anyway, that would be not just insanity, but that would also be hopelessness because I'm actually not really expecting different results. I'm just saying, screw it. I don't like the way I feel right now. And if I pour drugs on top of it or alcohol, I won't care for a certain amount of time and things will get worse, but I'm willing to accept that to not feel this pain. That's hopelessness. It's insane also, but I'm going in eyes wide open because I know that it's not going to miraculously change anything, but I don't care because I know from my experience with drugs and alcohol that is the only coping mechanism that I had for most of my life. The other thing is if it's a trial, I have to accept it. So for example, for me, I had a stroke, said that, probably ad infinitum, if you've watched any of these videos that I posted. But that was a big thing for me because, I was self-sufficient. I was a hard worker. I made decent money. I paid my bills. I sold some drugs to supplement my income, but I thought that I had it all under control. And then I had a stroke and I couldn't work for a whole year. I applied for disability. I was convinced that I was going to get it out of the gate. For anybody who is of that thought process, let me assure you that it is not the case. For very few diagnoses, you can get it right away, but you got to be pretty jacked up. So for most people, the government will make you jump through hoops for a minimum of 2 years. And I've heard 4 and 5 years is not uncommon. Well, bad news for somebody who's disabled, who actually has something that's disabling them and they need money. You're screwed if you have to wait 4 years. So what I had to do was, I went a year without working, and then it became abundantly clear to me that I was going to be completely screwed and lose my house if I didn't work. However, I couldn't go back to work in my regular capacity because I have physical limitations from my stroke. So luckily, thank God I have mental capacity, consider myself a fairly intelligent person, and I have other things that I can do besides just be a chef. And so I have found a job that I can physically do. It doesn't pay very much money, and it doesn't pay even enough because I can only work part-time. It doesn't pay enough to pay my bills. But I'll tell you what, if I didn't have it, I would be probably living in a refrigerator box. So I'm grateful to have a job. I am just trying to make it until I get disability, or maybe by the grace of God, I find a job that pays more money or something. But at any rate, that is something that I have to accept because I can wish and pray and fight it all I want, and I can't make these physical symptoms of my disability go away. So God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Trust me, I have worked long and hard trying to change that reality, And to my chagrin, that has not occurred. So is it a temptation? No, that is not a temptation. It is a fact, Jack. And so what I have had to do is just accept the fact that there's nothing I can do about it. Of course, now that I'm getting a little clarity in my life and getting a little sanity back, I can look at this situation, because for me, in my faith, God's using that to teach me some things. I have become quite a bit more patient. I was the most impatient person that I probably knew. Still struggle with selfishness and self pity. It's a character defect that I will possibly take to the grave. But I tell you what, I'm learning to be less selfish. The way that in the 12-step programs it teaches you to deal with selfishness is help other people, because it's kind of hard to be selfish when you're focused on somebody beside yourself. So, that is a tool. If you are super, self-absorbed, feeling self-pity, whatever, and you reach out to somebody, or someone reaches out to you and you go help them, or you talk to them on the phone and help them, you can temporarily get out of that selfishness and that self-seeking stuff by doing that. So that's a tool. So I'm learning that in the program. And I believe that my higher power is going to use these less than ideal circumstances for me to come out on the other side with a lot of character building. I've got a lot more peace. I'm still not waking up every morning and saying, hey, you know what? I'm glad I had a stroke. This is amazing. Thank you that I can't work my old job that I went to school for. I haven't gotten to that point. However, I have accepted the fact that there's nothing I can do about it, and that I have to work within that situation. And so I believe that my higher power wants me to be involved in the recovery field. So what can I do? Well, one thing that I came to an epiphany in the last video is that the enemy of my soul, who works through addiction to try to destroy me, has found a very effective tactic. If he can't kill me, which he's been unsuccessful doing by the grace of God, he can ruin my testimony. And I found out, some people that I go to NA with, they're like drug counselors and peer support people. They make good money, and it's not a hard job. It's something that I believe that I can excel in. However, the fly in the ointment for that is you have to be clean and sober for a year. Well, you know what? If I had been able to work this program properly 2 years ago when I got into it, I would probably have that job. However, that has not been the case, because I have succumbed about every 28 days or so to using one time and then getting back into recovery. And, I was like, hey, I'm cool, dude. I've dodged the bullet. I've got back in the program. I've cleaned my life up. My life's gotten better. I'm healthier. I've lost weight. I've reversed my diabetes. My relationship with my son is better. I've had a lot of benefits. However, I cannot say that I have been clean and sober for a year. So I am prevented from going into that line of work as I believe I am supposed to. So that also helped motivate me, because for the joy set before me, and I say, you know what? God help me. And if I'm successful at this, I have a job waiting on me that I can do. Unlike working in the kitchen and having to put the truck away and go in the freezer and rearrange the frozen boxes of frozen food. That's stuff that I did my whole life. Change the fryers, all that kind of laborious stuff. I was good at it. I was a food service manager. I made decent money. Plus I could get baked at work because I could do that zombified high, but I can't do that line of work anymore. But if I continue in this and am successful with sobriety for a year, then I have a job waiting on me making good money that like I said, I am fairly certain that I have what it takes to do that job. In addition to the fact that, the 12th step says that if I help other people, that it will help me stay clean. So if my job is to help other people, then, that sounds like a win-win situation to me. So I see that my higher power has a method to his madness. But one of the things that I have realized, and I realized it a while back, but I just kept doing it, was that I was expecting God to just zap me and say, oh, well, you're doing such a good job in the program. I mean, not like that was the dialogue, but, looking back, it seems as though, oh, God's just going to remove this from me because, there's things in the program that say, I believe that God can remove this obsession to use drugs and alcohol from me, and that he will if he is sought. And so, my brain, changes stuff into, what I have selective hearing, and, I just translate things into what I want to hear. So what my higher power told me in no uncertain terms is that, faith without works is dead. So I have faith that God can deliver me from this and that he will deliver me from it. But at no point in time did he say, no participation on your part is required. But what he told me was that if I take the first step and, try to stop on my own, and I realized that it had a lot to do with fear because I just didn't think I could do it. So, as long as things were going hunky dory, and I didn't have an overwhelming urge to drink or do drugs, I was fine. But as soon as the rubber meets the road, which for me is about 28 days, and I have an overwhelming urge to use, I'm like, okay, God, well, you know what? I don't know what to tell you, dude. You're not living up to your end of the bargain. So I guess I got to go do drugs again. And, just because that's my mindset does not make that reality. So, I always gave up. And, I've heard this analogy said that, if you're in the closet and you ask God to make you a ham sandwich and bring it to you, that you're going to starve to death because God will not make you a ham sandwich and bring it to you. And I had heard that and it made kind of sense to me, but I didn't really realize that I was doing exactly that with sobriety because, God says, I'll supply the ham for you and the mayonnaise and the bread, and it will be in your refrigerator. But if you want a ham sandwich, dude, you're going to have to walk in the kitchen and get a knife out of the drawer and spread the mayonnaise on some bread and put the ham on it and cheese if that's what you want. But you get the idea. You make the sandwich, you eat the sandwich. I was like, and I had a vision early in recovery when I was struggling with alcohol of me being in the grocery store, and because I'm disabled, I ride around on one of those little electric carts or motorized carts or whatever, smart carts, whatever you want to call them. And I had a vision because I was pissed off at God because I had made it to almost 30 days and I drank, and I had prayed for him to help me not drink. And so obviously it was his fault that I drank. And I was just, resentful. And I was like, God, you know what? I asked you to help me not drink, and I drank. And I'm telling you, he gave me this vision, and it wasn't like, like I was knocked out and I saw it like in living color. I'm not a nut job, but I saw this vision in my mind's eye, like a daydream of me being in the grocery store and getting a 6-pack out of the case and putting it in the cart. And Jesus, like with, light shining down from heaven in white robes, and the oh, walking over to my cart and picking the 6-pack up and putting it back in the case. And he goes, I'm not doing that, man. If you go to the grocery store and you buy a 6-pack of beer, you're going to drink the beer. Where I come in is if you do not pick up the 6-pack of beer and you go home and you're struggling to not go back up there and you pray for me to help you, I'll help you make it through the night. That's what I do. And so I had already known that because that was fairly early in recovery, but I was just continuing that same pattern. And so I have had, I'm grateful that I don't have those moments very often where it's like struggling and white knuckling it. But I get them. And I had a few towards the end of my 30 days, right before it came, because, my addiction knew that I was coming up on 30 days and that's been my pattern. So it, tried to get me. And so I had some nights when I get off work and I'd be like, wow, tonight would be a really great night to get some beer and drinking on the way home from work, because my addiction knows that, just drink a couple beers. And then after a couple beers, who gives a shit about recovery? Let's go to the bar. Let's get loaded, man. We're just getting warmed up now. But my addiction is like having sex with the gorilla. I'm not done until the gorilla says I'm done. So, I might just only want to drink 2 or 3 beers, but my addiction is not going to be happy with 2 or 3 beers, because as the program, they say, one is never enough. One is too many and 1,000 is never enough. Well, no, I don't need 1,000 beers, but I get the metaphor. I don't ever just drink 2 beers. And if I do just drink 2 beers, it won't just be 2 beers the next time. And I have learned in my addiction, that's the thing, being going to meetings and reading program material for 2 years, even though I didn't work the program properly, I learned a lot about myself, trying to work steps and talking to the sponsors. I learned a lot about myself, and they say, don't quit before the miracle happens. Well, that's what happened. I stayed around and I learned a lot about the program, and, and trying to improve my contact with my higher power through prayer and meditation and reading program literature. I gained some power to actually make it 30 days. And it was, the other thing, it's got to be one day at a time. And people told me that, and I'm just like, yeah, whatever. But I finally got to the point where, when I started stressing about the future, because that's what I do. Well, I don't want to use today, but I'm going to get some tax money back, or, after I have so many days clean, it'll be okay. I just have to dial it back down to praying and saying, please help me make it to bed sober tonight. And oftentimes, even though I didn't really struggle through the day, when I go to bed and I realize that, I didn't think about using, and I didn't use, and I thank my higher power for helping me make it to bed sober. Do that enough days in a row. And I was looking at my calendar this weekend to see what time my doctor's appointment was today. And I noticed that today was 30 days clean. And so I went to a meeting at noon today, and I picked up a 30-day chip for NA. And that's how you do it, one day at a time. But I had to learn how to do it one day at a time. And cumulatively, it's taken me 3 decades of really working the program hard. It's taken me 2 years trying to do it right. But anyway, I hope somebody got something out of this. If anybody wants to contact me, you can do it in the comments, I guess. I'll see it eventually, but, feel free to send me an email at P as in Paul, IAS as in Sam, T as in Tango, ER67 at hotmail.com. That's Piaster67 at hotmail.com. Feel free to shoot me an email if you got any questions, comments, whatever. So fight the good fight. And this is Roberto signing out.